Hi.
Hello there.
Hello.
We're gonna get started. So, good to see you all here today. Looks like a pretty good group tonight. So, sorry about any room confusion anyone had getting to this room or another room, a bunch of strangeness. But anyway, we're in this room. Luckily, we've got everything working. We have announcements. We have our debate watching night this weekend, Saturday at 6 p.m. The address for it is right there. And again, just to clarify, this is not necessarily us debating. It is us watching a debate and discussing it. That discussion may turn into a debate, hopefully not.
Friendly dialogue.
Friendly dialogue.
As long as it's a well-moderated debate, I don't see a problem.
We'll see.
Unilaterally declare myself on the right.
Just to say, we will have free pizza, and if
Yes.
you need a ride, then people will definitely be happy to give you a ride. So just let us know in the Discord.
Yeah, if anyone needs a ride, the address is somewhere kind of northeast Plano area, just for reference.
My house.
But yeah, we will have pizza. So, just kind of a show of hands, just so we can kind of prepare. Who thinks that they'll like definitely be there, or just like probably be there on Saturday, 6 p.m.
Obviously, if this is like your first time here, you're under no obligation to go. But
Yeah.
You must. You're required to.
actually, no, you're right. You are under obligation.
All right.
Sure.
Alrighty.
It's a required course.
Yes, apologetics 101. You have to take it in order to prove on.
It should be.
There will be an exam at the end of.
So, but yeah, other than that, I think we're good. We got our own little Steve Lee tonight, and talking about the moral arguments, so that's going to be interesting. So I'll leave it over to him.
Thanks. But when Steve participated in a debate on campus a while back on this topic, a few years ago.
2017.
I didn't mention that, but, and he's taught at Prestonwood Christian Academy for 20 years, right?
Over 20 years, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I started when I was 18. You know what? I had a first this year. I've been at PCA for 26 years. I teach apologetics at PCA, and I've been there 26 years. And this year, I am teaching a student who is the son of a student I taught.
That's how you really feel.
That's when you know you need to retire. That's what you need to do. All right, so anyways, interestingly, I was at UNT a couple of nights ago, and I'm just gonna pick on y'all because you're my group, okay? So I've been coming here for, I don't know, like 10 years now, Alan, for speaking, which you've been very kind to extend this to me. But I was at UNT, a third little apologetics group, and it was very, very disorganized, to say the least. But what was the most interesting is right at the very beginning, like 4 people dressed in Viking outfits showed up. And someone whispered, "Here comes the Norse believers." Norse believers. And come lo and behold, they worship Odin and Loki. And I'm like, and then now I'm looking in the audience, and I got a Viking in the audience. I don't care if he's got a long hair. He looks like a Viking in the audience. So, and it's, I looked it up. I actually knew about this, but it is a rising movement. It's called Asatru, is what it's called. It's like Swedish for like the family of the gods or something like that. I don't know. And it is like rising in popularity in Sweden and apparently University of North Texas. I was like, dude, that's a first. I can check that off the list, is what I can do. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the moral argument for God's existence tonight. And to start, I actually want to show you a clip. Now I'm going to set the stage for this clip. I always forget the name of this movie. It's like Batman Returns, Batman Begins. It's the one with the Joker.
The Dark Knight.
Okay, I totally don't know the name of the movie at all. The Dark Knight. And the scene that I want to show you is the Joker has there's 2 transport vehicles, right? And the Joker has put a bomb on on each transport vehicle. And one of the transport boats is Gotham citizens, and the other is prisoners. And they're leaving the island of Gotham, or whatever the geography of Gotham is, I don't know. And what's interesting is the other boat has the detonator, right? And I just figured, you know what? If you're gonna start a meeting, the Dark Knight's not a bad way to start a meeting. So I'll just go ahead and play it, and then I'll talk about what it relates to the moral argument for God's existence.
I love it.
And see, hopefully the sound will work.
Down to the engine room now.
You know, hear okay?
A little bit. Maybe we could shut the lights off just while the video's going.
Captain, 100 barrels down there rigged to blow.
There you go.
Oh my God. Looks like some kind of detonator. Why would they give us the detonator to our own bomb?
Tonight you're all going to be a part of a social experiment. Through the magic of diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate, I'm ready right now to blow you all sky high.
Liberty, come in, over. Dead.
Anyone attempts to get off their boat, you all die.
Zero again.
Each of you has a remote. Blow up the other boat.
Force is on the ferry, but it's not the source. West. Gordon, I have the Joker's location. Pruitt Building. Assemble on the building officer.
At midnight, I blow you all up. If, however, one of you presses the button, I'll let that boat live. So, who's it gonna be? Harvey Dent's most wanted scumbag collection, or the sweet, innocent civilians? You choose. Oh, and you might want to decide quickly, because the people on that boat may not be quite so noble.
Stay back.
Well, now, who are you to decide? We ought to talk this over at least.
We don't all have to die. Those men had their chance.
We are not going to talk about this.
Why aren't we talking about it?
We're talking over the same exact thing on the other boat. Let's put it to a vote.
I want everybody to put their votes on this piece of paper.
The tally is 140 against 396 for.
Do it.
We're still here. That means they haven't killed us yet either. You don't want to die, but you don't know how to take a life. Give it to them. They will kill you and take it anyway.
No one wants to get their hands dirty. Fine. I'll do it. Those men on that boat, they made their choices. They chose to murder and steal. It doesn't make any sense for us to have to die too.
Give it to them. You can tell them I took it by force. Give it to them. And I'll do what you should have did 10 minutes ago.
use the light.
You gonna leave us hanging on what happened?
Oh, totally, totally gonna leave you hanging. Is that bright enough?
It's
Okay,
good.
if it's not, you can,
That might help on your other slides, that's good.
maybe, yeah. I was gonna say convert to atheism or something like that. When it comes to the chase. All right, so anyways, I won't show the ending. Who's never seen this movie before? Anybody not seen this movie? Dude, actually, you're probably not a Christian. All right. That's your assignment, not read the Gospel of Mark, but to watch The Dark Knight. That's what you need to watch. Now, this scenario that Batman faced, what do they call that?
I was
Yeah,
Trolley
what kind of
problem.
I was
It's a
6
moral
when this movie
dilemma.
came out.
What?
I was 6 when this movie came out.
6? What was the problem? I don't understand what the problem
That means you can stream it for free.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, so we got it right up front. This is called a moral dilemma, okay? And now you can sort of start relating it to the moral argument. Now, this is what I find interesting about this clip as I reflect on morality, is everyone understands this is a moral dilemma, right? But did they have to argue for morality before they watched the movie? To show that, hey, morality exists. Did they have to do that? Did they have to put up a syllogism at the beginning of the film? Premise 1, understand this film, you must believe in objective morality. Premise 2, no, they didn't have to do that. What did the filmmakers already assume of the audience? That they believed in morality. It was completely assumed. And see, if morality is such a contentious thing, if morality exists or doesn't exist, if that's such a contentious thing, they couldn't make movies like this. They wouldn't make any sense. You see, if morality didn't exist, this is not a moral dilemma. It's just, well, which flavored ice cream is he going to choose? But no one would watch a movie with the kid walking into an ice cream shop going, chocolate, vanilla, with the eerie music in the background. You'd be like, okay, well, maybe if it's a French film, they would actually do that. All right, French films, they're freaking weird, man. I've seen my fair share of French films, and I never want to see another one again. They don't make a sense at all. But notice, they didn't have to argue for morality for the audience to understand it. They already assumed the audience believed in morality. And in fact, every book, novel, that you read, or TV show you watch, or movie you watch, they're assuming morality exists. If there's a good and an evil, and there's a struggle, there's a dilemma, what is he gonna do? And of course, I'm not gonna show you, you can watch it on your own. But this is really interesting to me that they make movies, totally, it has nothing to do with Christianity, or theism versus atheism, or anything like that. And they don't even argue for the existence of morality. They are assuming the existence. Was this something I said? Yeah, kind of like Batman. So I find that very interesting, right? That the morality is so obvious to people that they make films all the time about it and don't argue for it, don't give evidence for it. They just assume that the audience, the reader, already believes it. And I think we can develop a moral argument for God's existence from the basis of people already believing in morality. This is how the argument runs, right? And the argument runs like this. If God does not exist, then objective moral truth does not exist. Premise 2, objective moral truth does exist, therefore God exists. All right, that's a syllogism. It's a modus tollens, if you want to get technical, which is a hypothetical, and hypotheticals are if-then, statements. You got modus ponens, modus tollens, and this is a tollens, which is a denial of the consequent, which gives you a denial of the antecedent. It would be sort of similar to, if it rains outside, then it'll be wet. It's not wet, therefore it did not rain. Right? That's the structure it has. So it's got correct logical structure. The question we have to ask ourselves now are the premises true? Is what we have to look at. Right? So the structure of the argument is sound, or not sound, but the structure is valid. And now we have to ask if the statements are true. And if the statements are true and the logical structure is valid, then you have a sound argument or a good reason to think the conclusion is true, right? Did you have a question, comment up front? You had your hand up.
I was wondering about the logic for a second, but I.
Yeah, this one's a weird one, right? Because it already starts in the negation.
Yeah.
In the first premise.
Like a double
But
negation
then,
going on.
yeah, but that's not good English, but it's good philosophy. You know, so technically it would run, if it were to look, you know, more puristic to a modus tollens, is if God does not exist and objective moral values do not exist, it is not the case that objective moral values do not exist.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's not the case that God does not exist, and then you just take out the double negatives, and that is what you do. So it's sort of, that is sort of a tricky one, you know, there. But that's the argument, and that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, is saying, okay, are the premises true? And do we have any reasons to think these premises are true? Now, to do that, given this is reasonable faith, you know what I got coming. I got a reasonable faith video to show you is what I got. All right, and so this is Wayman Craig's moral argument for God's existence, and then we'll begin to parse it out.
Can you be good without God?
Yeah, I'll see you okay.
Let's find out. Absolutely astounding. There you have it. Undeniable proof that you can be good without believing in God. But wait, the question isn't, can you be good without believing in God? The question is, can you be good without God? See, here's the problem. If there is no God, what basis remains for objective good or bad, right or wrong? If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. And here's why. Without some objective reference point, we have no way of saying that something is really up or down. God's nature provides an objective reference point for moral values. It's the standard against which all actions and decisions are measured. But if there's no God, there's no objective reference point. All we are left with is one person's viewpoint, which is no more valid than anyone else's viewpoint. This kind of morality is subjective, not objective. It's like a preference for strawberry ice cream. The preference is in the subject, not the object. So it doesn't apply to other people. In the same way, subjective morality applies only to the subject. It's not valid or binding for anyone else. So in a world without God, there can be no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. God has expressed his moral nature to us as commands. These provide the basis for moral duties. For example, God's essential attribute of love is expressed in his command to love your neighbor as yourself. This command provides a foundation upon which we can affirm the objective goodness of generosity, self-sacrifice, and equality. And we can condemn as objectively evil greed, abuse, and discrimination. This raises a problem. Is something good just because God wills it, or does God will something because it is good? The answer is neither one. Rather, God wills something because he is good. God is the standard of moral values, just as a live musical performance is the standard for a high-fidelity recording.
Without your love.
The more a recording sounds like the original, the better it is. Likewise, the more closely a moral action conforms to God's nature, the better it is. But if atheism is true, there is no ultimate standard. So there can be no moral obligations or duties. Who or what lays such duties upon us? No one. Remember, for the atheist, humans are just accidents of nature, highly evolved animals. But animals have no moral obligations to one another. When a cat kills a mouse, it hasn't done anything morally wrong. The cat's just being a cat. If God doesn't exist, we should view human behavior in the same way. No action should be considered morally right or wrong. But the problem is, good and bad, right and wrong, do exist. Just as our sense experience convinces us that the physical world is objectively real, our moral experience convinces us that moral values are objectively real. Every time you say, hey, that's not fair, that's wrong, that's an injustice, you affirm your belief in the existence of objective morals. We're well aware that child abuse, racial discrimination, and terrorism are wrong for everybody, always. Is this just a personal preference or opinion? No. The man who says that it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. What all this amounts to then is a moral argument for the existence of God. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. But objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. Atheism fails to provide a foundation for the moral reality every one of us experiences every day. In fact, the existence of objective morality points us directly to the existence of God.
All right, so that's a good introductory video. And just to remind us what the issue is and is not, we are not asking that you have to believe in God in order to be good. That is not the issue at hand at all. The issue is, can anybody be good? Is there goodness at all if God does not exist? And that's the issue we're looking at. So what I like to do is I like defending the second premise first, right? The second premise was objective moral truths do exist. And an objective moral truth is an absolute true moral prescription that's like the truth of mathematics or science and logic, in which they are discovered and not invented. That's what an objective moral truth would be. These prescriptions are true regardless whether anyone believes them or even behaves by them, right? So it doesn't matter if people believe it, behave by it, they're true regardless, just like if people believe or don't believe in algebra, or trig or what have you, which some people are like, I don't believe it, I don't want to take it anymore, right? And examples of them might be like murder, rape, incest, genocide, torturing babies for pleasure, and the like. So I want to go by, yeah, you got a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you explained how it's analogous to like math or science or logic, but each of those have like methodologies to determine what is true or untrue or breaks the rules of them. So I'm wondering, what is the methodology for finding objective moral truth?
Yeah, usually it's intuitive, is how you do it, all right? And things can be intuitive, just like certain mathematical equations might be sort of intuitive. You're just like, well, obviously 2 + 2 = 4, and it's just sort of intuitive. Now, each one of these domains will have different methodologies, and that's not analogous. What's analogous that I'm making is that they're objective, right? Because math is objective, whether people believe in 2 + 2 = 4 or not. Same with logic and the like itself, that it's objective. And that's what I'm arguing for, that they're objective, like mathematics or logic or the like. And the methodology, primarily for moral truths, they're just intuitive. We just know that it exists, is what we do. And so and to get to this methodology, it's right here. All right, let me go ahead and jump into the methodology. Does anyone here believe it's morally permissible to torture babies for pleasure? Right? And I've done this for 15, 18 years, and I've asked this question of thousands and thousands of students and people in my presentations, and no one has ever raised their hand. And I even extended, does anyone think it's morally permissible for anyone to torture a baby for pleasure? Okay, so everyone in here has now agreed that you believe in what?
At least one moral truth.
At least one objectively moral truth, like raping women or men, beating someone's brains out with a baseball bat because they looked at you funny, right? These are obviously, or practicing human trafficking. We know these things are wrong, and not just like, I don't like it, like I don't like chocolate ice cream. No, but it's like, it's morally repugnant and evil, and we should stand against it. Now, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I was going to kind of go back to the intuition talk, and I feel like, personally, I feel like intuition is a bad way of describing it. I would describe it more like.
All right, let me stop you right there. You said, I personally feel. What was that?
An intuition.
That was an intuition. Thanks for demonstrating my point. Next question.
For real though, I was gonna say something along
No,
those
I'm
lines.
being for real. Intuitions are a great way of knowing things. We use them all the time. Yeah, and,
Can't your intuition be wrong?
yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it
It's like
unreliable?
mathematical, sometimes when you do math, you could be wrong, can't you?
Well,
Just
right,
like
you
your
can
ordinary
use
decimal
math to
sense is
determine
wrong.
if it is
Yeah.
right or
Yeah,
wrong.
just because something can be done wrong or lead you astray doesn't mean it's invalid.
Well, right, but
Yeah.
you're saying intuition is the methodology, no?
Well, yeah, it's the way that we know moral truths exist, absolutely.
Right, but I'm saying like, if you can do math, right or wrong, you can check it by doing the work.
Mhm.
But with intuition, you can't check it.
Yeah, actually, you can't. You can't say like, well, someone says, well, I disagree with your intuition. And then when you start disagreeing, then you start having dialogue and you start arguing for or against your intuition. It's like, well, why do you have that intuition? And then you begin to build on those. And ultimately, you can begin to even check your intuitions, and they can be shown to be wrong.
So it seems like intuition isn't the methodology then, it's just kind of like a jumping off point. The methodology itself is discussing it and determining.
But intuitions are things we discuss. Yeah.
Comparative.
So, I think it might be a bit like the axioms of mathematics, where there's more of like a starting point where you are using basically intuition to get to the axioms. And there's a little bit of disagreement, like on one axiom in particular. So there might be, a little bit of question, but everybody thinks there's these basic things that you could build on in math. And most people think there's at least some moral truth, and they might argue about them and have, you're bringing up an interesting question epistemologically, like how do you know it? But the real core thing I think Steve's getting at is more of like the ontological, like, is there something to be had? Is there a truth at all? And, at least most people seem to think, yeah, there is some kind of moral truth, even if we might have a few disagreements.
Yeah. Yes, sir?
So loads of people, of course, agree that there is an objective moral values, but lots of people also disagree about what those are. And so isn't the very existence of conflicting perceptions of objective moral values an argument against the collective derivation from one source?
No, actually disagreement might even indicate that there really is an objective moral truth to actually disagree about. Because if there was no objective moral truth, then there's really nothing to be disagreeing about. And you're trying to discover what that objective moral truth is in that disagreement itself, is what you're doing. I don't see how a disagreement would do that. And I don't think they're quite as disparaging or divergent as some people claim as well. For example, I don't know of any society that builds statues in honor of their cowards, or the like. There seems to be this universal, from culture, society to society, a very, very agreed upon moral grounding. Here, if you look at The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis, in his appendix, he actually lists different cultures and the very similar moral objectives that they all tend to adhere to itself. A lot of times when you see cultures diverge, it's not because they diverge on their moral beliefs, but on their factual beliefs is what they're actually differing upon. So for example, one culture, when their parents die, they bury their parents, in the ground. A second culture, when their parents die, they eat a portion of their body. And you're like, oh my God, it's just a completely different moral, moral system that they have. Actually, it's the exact same moral system, but different factual beliefs. The first culture that buries their dead believes factually, right or wrong about this belief, but they believe the fact of the matter is that their parents will live on in the afterlife, hence why they bury them and they'll be resurrected. The second culture that actually eats a portion of their parents' body believes a different fact, whether it's right or wrong, that their parents will live on within them. And that's why they eat a portion of their deceased parent's body. And so in both cases, while very different practices, it's the exact same moral belief of honoring your parents. And so a lot of times when we see different moral practices, it's actually the same moral truth that's adhered by differing groups or cultures or people, but different factual beliefs that they actually disagree on. You know, not all the time, you know, but I think there's a lot more agreement about moral truths than a lot of people give credence to. And someone else had, yeah, there have been several hands, so I'm just trying to get it around. Was there someone else? Yes.
Oh, I was just looking up a study that has found that there are 7 moral rules that are found in cultures like all over the world. Like this is a secular study. It's not done with any sort of like religious presuppositions, but and this is a study that came out of the Oxford Institute of Cognitive and Evolutionary Anthropology, and they analyzed accounts of ethics from 60 societies from a very large number of sources all over the world. And I'm trying to see if I can find a list of like morals or something, but the point is that they found actually a very high degree of similarity in the core moral principles.
Yeah, so they're affirming C.S. Lewis and independence and the abolition of man, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So isn't the very existence of sort of general agreements against specific behaviors a self-defeating argument? Because in order for us to agree about certain behaviors, there has to be people who do those and think they're good. Like, for example, we agree that rape is wrong, but that's a thing because there are people who think that rape is good and do it. So isn't the very existence of declaiming behaviors like a self-defeating argument for, say, universal values?
All right, so the people agree. Well, that's not why I'm arguing that objective moral truths exist. I'm like you already believe in objective moral truths, and we intuitively know it, that they exist. Itself, we know it's wrong, and when someone does rape someone, they're wrong for doing it, aren't they?
Well, see, my argument is not against objective moral values, rather that you can't achieve like that endpoint through consensus. Because the person who rapes someone disagrees with you.
Definitely not, I don't want to argue for consensus. Definitely I'm not arguing stuff, but I'm showing that, yeah, this is a sort of an intuitive argument that people already believe in objective morality. And so, and we have every reason to believe our intuitions unless there's a defeater against that intuition, all right? For example, the video showed that guy tripping, and he fell down. And he says, just as it's reasonable for him to believe in an external world, against defeaters, against it, right? We're just as justified to believe in our moral intuitions as well, unless there's a defeater against it. And just someone not behaving by those moral intuitions is not a defeater. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to that by saying that so first of all, I'm not a rapist myself, so I might be wrong on this, but I have an intuition that says that rapists probably don't think, oh, this is a good thing. I think they know that it's bad, but they still do it anyway.
So what about like the celebrations of terror that we've seen around the world? There are countless examples. Like we can clearly disprove
people
the
can
fact
be
that
wrong,
loads of people celebrate violence. Loads of people celebrate wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not merely that they're all conflicted with guilt and miserable. There are a lot of people who genuinely espouse objective moral value systems that elevate things like death and
with the
destruction.
example of the terrorists, I would even think that would be an affirmation of objective morality because they're believing the people that they're fighting against are not innocent and deserve what they're getting because of the oppression they're receiving, whatever the facts may be. And I don't want to get too far afield on that because I'm no geopolitical expert on terrorism, but I think that's even the case, And so they didn't have I'll take cannibalism, right? Wait a minute, that seems like that's a sort of consensus, and they're eating other people that are alive, Well, it's actually, they don't have a different moral belief. They have, again, a different factual belief because the people that they are actually cannibalizing, they don't adhere to them to being human. And if they're not human, you're not doing anything wrong. And they don't cannibalize their own because that would be wrong. Because those are persons, or they have value, or whatever, their understanding of why or why not they would do it. But it's a different factual belief as well. You know, same with like Nazi Germany, you know, they killed the Jews because they didn't think the Jews were innocent, whatever the facts may be, you know, but that was the idea, you know, when they're doing these acts of terror, they're doing it because something is wrong, and what are they affirming? Objective morality is what they're, whether they're right or wrong on the facts of the matter. All right, so I'm going to move on and take a look at some other ideas. Anyone who denies the existence of moral truth claims they tend to subscribe to moral relativism. And I find this to be just more posturing and not being honest. Quite honestly, when people appeal to moral relativism, like the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi leaders appealed to moral relativism as well. They said we acted on the framework of our legal system. All right, is what we did. And the Chief Council appealed to a law above the law that transcends culture itself. In the Nuremberg trials, they appealed to what's called natural law, not the laws of nature, you know, like sciences, but natural law, which is a field of legal study where it is a norm that people believe in objective morality, even above and beyond, and we can hold people accountable, you know, who acted against it as well. And so this moral relativism, there's another video I want to show you, and I thought this was interesting. Yeah, I got time. It's an interesting video. It's called Cruel Logic, and it was done, I wanted to show this to you because it was written and filmed and produced by a guy named Brian Gottawa, and he is a film director and writer. He actually wrote the screenplay, the script To End All Wars. It's an older film, but it had Kiefer. It was one of those Sutherland. The Sutherland dad, Kiefer Sutherland, and then the son. It was the son. It was a really good movie, you know, itself. But he did this short clip, and now recently he's actually come out with a novel with the same name called Cruel Logic. But anyways, I'll show you the clip and show you that relativism actually is a bankrupt position. And even academic scholars are now recognizing the bankrupt position of relativism.
Wakey, wakey. Hello, Dr. Pomeranke. I heard your lecture tonight at the college on criminal biology. DNA, instinct, and aggression. It's a well thought out presentation, but a bit abstract. Too academic, if you ask me. What I want to know is, have you ever really lived out your theory? Or are you content writing your papers inside your ivory tower, torturing your captive audience of students with your intellectual posturing? What do you want from me? I'm here to test your hypothesis. You're a sociobiologist, are you not? Yes. Well, in your lecture, you argued for the genetic origins of crime. Biology determines behavior. Well, I'd like to debate you on that. Only in this debate, The stakes are real. If you win, I let you go. If I win, that's part of the proposition.
What proposition?
The issue resolved. There is no valid reason why I should not kill you. Debating for the negative, Professor Palmer. And for the affirmative, yours truly.
You are gonna kill me.
Please. I'll do anything you say. Stimulus, response.
Please don't kill me.
Give me one good reason.
It's illegal. Murder's illegal. You'll go to jail.
I don't plan on being caught.
But it's wrong to kill.
Professor, don't go getting all wall on me. You said that our DNA determines our behavior. DNA has no morality.
It's abnormal. Your DNA is abnormal.
Abnormality has to do with statistical averages, Professor, not right or wrong.
But society agrees killing is wrong.
Society is another word for statistical average. We're not all from the same gene pool, you know.
That doesn't make it right.
And it doesn't make it wrong.
Our species won't survive if we allow killing.
You mean you won't survive? I will. Me, in my DNA.
You're a sick man. Your mind is diseased.
Correction. I'm a genetically determined man with a biological predisposition toward aggression. Killing is in my genes, all according to your theory. Which brings us back to the central question. If all that I am is genetically determined, why should I not in fact kill you when I am scientifically bound by my DNA to do so?
Please, have mercy. Take pity, I beg you.
There's no mercy or pity in these genes. I'm a predator by nature.
No, please, I beg you, please.
Beggars can't be choosers, Professor. No survival race. And I think it's time you learned your lesson. Ideas, you see, have consequences.
All right, so there's serious problems with moral relativism, as sort of the video gets at itself, and that relativism is really a bankrupt ethical system that is being abandoned by philosophers in the last 50 years. For one, if morality was relative, subjective, not objective, then there could be no moral progress. All right, reform would be an incoherent concept, is what would happen. And so we didn't get better as a society, American society, when we outlawed slavery. We just changed. And we could go back to it, and there'd be nothing wrong with it if morality is relative. Another problem is moral reformers would be an enigma. I was actually here at UTD several years ago in a class in which a student was talking, and there was some sort of roundtable discussion in a class, and they were talking about, hey, I think society has come up with morality, and they sort of debate it, and they struggle, and they argue, and from that emerges the social norms, and those become the moral standards for the society. And I remember I looked over and I said, then you must think Martin Luther King was an evil-looking individual that deserved what he got when he was assassinated. And of course, the student looked at me and said, what? And I said, yeah, you should think that, because what was he going against?
Standards of the
The
day.
moral standards of the day. The Bible, he was going against the society, and he's saying society was wrong. But if society is the standard for morality, society can never be wrong. Because if you the moment you say a society is wrong, you're assuming there is a standard outside of that society, is what you're doing. Other problems, it's impossible to praise or condemn another person or another culture. In a moral sense, individual societies become infallible, as I sort of demonstrated with the Martin Luther King example, and moral disagreement would be impossible. I mean, like real moral disagreement would be impossible. If there was no objective morality, there'd be nothing to disagree about. It'd be like arguing, what's the best flavored ice cream, right? What's the best flavored ice cream? Chocolate. What's the best flavored ice cream? Absolutely, But when I say what's the best favorite ice cream, the language is sort of tricking me up. Is that really what we're arguing about? What's the best favorite ice cream? Like when you say chocolate, you say cookies and cream. You say cookies and cream, right? What do you literally mean by chocolate is the best favorite ice cream? What do you mean by that?
It is objectively superior.
No, that's not. Wrong person to ask. He literally means, I'll just speak for you. All right, he means it's his favorite flavor, right? That's what's going on. Then your favorite flavor. And there is no really moral disagreement right there. I mean, that would be a very short-lived debate, wouldn't it? Because the moment you realize what you're talking about, you're not talking about what is objectively the best favorite ice cream. You're actually talking about what is subjectively your favorite, is what's occurring. But we do have moral disagreements. And I mean, no one goes to war over ice cream. Anybody know of a war that's been started because of ice cream?
Well,
right?
Bluebell went out the other day.
What? What?
When Bluebell went out a few.
Oh, and Bluebell. Well, that's a different factual belief. Bluebell went out. But people do go to war. People do go commit violence, terrorism even, because they have a moral objection and they're adhering to an objective moral standard, whether they're right or wrong on that. And so essentially what I'm saying is moral intuitions should be believed unless you have a good reason to not believe them. So for example, if I said, I believe it's morally impermissible to torture babies for pleasure, is there any reason for me to think that intuition is wrong? And if there isn't, then I should adhere to that intuition, right? And that's sort of where we're going at with, we know objective morality exists. Yeah.
It seems to me like, what's the purpose of the intuition? Because if you're using some other standard to prove whether it's true or not, then the intuition you can just cast it aside. It's like, if I flipped a coin, I could get the same result, right? I flip a coin to decide what I take a stance on for a moral argument, and then if I go out and prove it, I believe it. If I don't, I don't. So it seems like the intuition is no better than a coin flip.
Yeah, maybe I'm misexplaining intuition, but intuition is just not haphazardly adhering to something. That's not what intuition is, and it's not like a mother's intuition, like she always knows when you're getting in trouble kind of thing, but they just know you. It's not like that kind of intuition, or even a gut feeling. I got a gut feeling. I mean an intellectual intuition. And philosophers, interestingly enough, I had to write like 80 pages on intuition in my dissertation. It was just unbelievable. It is a very developed field philosophically. And there's different types of intuition, and people mean different things by intuition, but I'm talking about rational intuition. And rational intuition is to have any reason to think it's wrong to torture, that I'm incorrect for thinking that torturing an innocent baby for pleasure is morally wrong. And I don't think there really is. And unless you can give me one, then I'm within I have rational ground to stand on the truth that moral truths, objective moral truths exist. Yeah.
So I can say that, like, I'm in a room because I see myself in the room, but then the moral relativism angle is like, well, what if you're hallucinating? It's like, I can still see it, right? You can still have intuition, and you can know this is real because I see it there are exceptions to that rule, but the rule still stands.
Yeah, and you're within your rational grounds to adhere that, yeah, I'm in the room and I'm not
I don't need the
hallucinating, unless I
scientific
have a
proof,
good
yeah.
reason that there would be a defeater against that intuition, which there can be, absolutely. I mean, that's just the debate of philosophy. Anyone can bring a position and then argue against it, and that's the fun of philosophy, and keeps us employed, I suppose. Because why else would you do philosophy? Yeah.
Is this sort of raising it's almost like a practical argument for the existence of objective morality? Because you can say, there may be different moral systems and people may disagree about what it was, but human society and human interaction cannot function without some moral basis of agreement. And so, you can say on your individual basis, oh, well, it's all subjective, whatever. But because human society cannot function without some sort of moral premise, whether it's the same from society to society or not, that would seem to suggest that there has to be some such thing as moral objectivity, because we have to be able to function as a society.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a reason to believe in objective morality. I think that's sort of like the fallout that objective morality gives you is a civilized society that can function and last and the like, and that's sort of a positive aspect of having objective morality itself. But I don't know if that's the reason why objective morality exists itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna respond to that because I'm not someone who believes in objective morality. I would kind of say it's something like, you can almost call it like a convenient truth that we sort of affirm to ourselves, kind of like, it's easier to tell kids, if you're good, then Santa Claus will bring you presents. That's not really what happens. That's not how you get a good understanding of why you should be good and how you're rewarded for it. But it's much simpler than trying to tackle deep philosophical and moral quandaries, because most people don't really want to do that.
Well, there's a developmental process. You have to find the stage that's appropriate to your developmental stage, yes. But, like, for example, torturing babies for fun. Well, let's look at Sparta. Their belief is that basically suffering and being harsh on children makes them stronger. And so for them, maybe torturing the child yields a societal benefit, and for them it's not wrong because it fits with their moral system. But they still have a moral system that says there is still something good, an end that needs to be achieved, and so they still have to have some basis for it.
Yeah, the torturing or the severe training of Spartan children, I don't think is the same as torturing babies for pleasure. They weren't doing it for pleasure. They're doing it for survival. They're doing it for other reasons, but not pleasure. And that's why I put the sentiment the way I did. It's torturing babies for pure pleasure and no other reason is morally wrong. And we all know that. We all know that's true. And since we all know that's true, we all believe in objective morality, because I think it's because it is true, not because we even agree on it. I think it's, even if we found someone who thinks it's okay to torture babies for pleasure, what would we think of that person? We would know there's something cognitively wrong with them. They need help or counseling or pills or electric shock therapy or something. I don't know. There's another quandary, right? Once you start saying something's wrong, or you protest, or you're rebelling against something, and saying that's not the way it is, no justice, no peace, that's all affirming the existence of objective morality is what's going on. And a lot of people give lip service maybe to relativism or subjectivism, but I think we know that objective morality exists, because that gives us the basis to disagree, it gives the basis to even protest or revolt, and the like. So that's I think that's what's going on with objective morality. Yeah.
Wait, so let's say we come across a person who does enjoy torturing babies. Then how do we know that person's is the objective morality and everyone else is wrong?
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you find someone who thinks it's okay to torture babies for pleasure, they make excuses for it, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the moment they make excuses for it, they're saying, well, what I'm doing, it's the reason I don't have to obey that objective moral truth any longer, you know, or for some other reason of what's going on, you know. And even then, the person who's torturing babies for pleasure, guess what? I probably can push their buttons in other areas if they're not torturing me. You know?
Yeah.
And find that they actually believe in objective moral truths in some other areas as well. You know, and maybe just not that one, but I think that's what's going on. Now, here's the deal, right? What is the basis for those values, those moral truths? What makes torturing babies for pleasure wrong? I'm not asking how do we learn it, you know, or the like, but what actually makes it wrong, okay? Now, there's a couple of potential sources. You could say society, convention, societal convention, or a construct, culture, personal experience, or God. These are all potential, you know, sources or groundings for objective moral truth. Now, the problem is, if morality finds its source in individuals or culture, then that's not objective, that is subjective. Because guess what societies and individuals can do? They can change their mind, can't they? And that's relative or subjective. It can change. You can make murder, rape, incest, slavery, genocide, torture, babies for pleasure to be moral goods itself. And so you couldn't condemn the Nazi regime for, you know, slaughtering not just the Jews, but Jehovah's Witnesses and homosexuals and dissidents and the like. You know, you might not like it, but if society is the source, you can't say they're wrong. And if individuals are the source for morality, what if I decide that I like to take my junior students, I teach juniors, and I want to rip their esophagus out with my teeth, right? And if this particular junior student believe in individual subjective morality, I'll tell you what they're not going to be saying. They're not going to be saying, well, what an interesting expression of your individual morality, you know? I mean, they're not going to be saying anything, your esophagus is in my teeth, right? You know, but no, they're going to be beating me off of them and saying I am wrong to do that. And I'm like, well, no, I'm just expressing my individual morality, you know, and they're going to be backing off very, very quickly. Now, here's the issue. Since I think objective morality exists, all right, and I think I have good reason to trust my intuitions. I have no defeaters against those intuitions for my belief in objective truths. And even, and the deal is even atheists believe in objective truths. Right? I mean, Michael Ruse, we saw the video. He is an atheist philosopher, scientist at Florida State University. He says, the man who says it's morally permissible to rape little children is just as wrong as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. And so, you looked up a study. I should have looked up this study. This one, they do a philosophical survey of philosophy professors like every 5 years. And over the last like 20 years of this survey, moral realism has now become the overwhelming majority, not like 50, not super majority like 75. It's like 85 to 90% of philosophers are now adhering to moral realism, which is another way to say objective morality itself. So you don't have to be a Christian or theist to believe in objective morality. Even atheists like Michael Ruse believes in objective morality. Now, here's the interesting thing I believe about objective morality is it gives this sense of oughtness, that you ought to do this or you ought not to do that, like a sense of duty or obligation, you know, to the individual. Now, here's the interesting thing I find about duty or obligation. And to me, this is the most interesting part of the moral argument, is this sense of duty or oughtness or obligation. Where does duty come from? Well, obligations, duties, or oughtness cannot come from objects. No one has an obligation to an object, right? An example, and it's an analogous example, I stop at stop signs because I'm obligated not to red octagonal shapes with the letters STOP printed on them. And that's an object. I'm obligated to stop at stop signs because of persons, or other persons on the road, or myself, because I don't want to get a ticket, I feel obligated to myself, and so hence I stop at the stop sign. So I have this sense of obligation, not to objects like the podium. I don't teach my class because of a podium, or the PowerPoint that I created, but it's the obligation of the agreement I came in with the children's parents, and that's why I feel obligated to teach. So we have obligations not to objects, but to persons. In sense, objective morality gives a sense of obligation. And society and individuals cannot be the source of that obligation, because our obligation is not to subjective morality, but to objective morality. The only other person left over would be God. And I think this is actually not only a good argument for God, but an argument for a personal God itself, because he would have to be a person to give this sense of weightiness or gravity upon us to behave or not behave in certain ways, or to value or not value certain things, or over other things, and the like. And hence, that's why I think God is the best source for objective morality itself. So, because individuals and societies don't give might give obligation, but it does not give an obligation to objective morality. It would only give an obligation to a subjective morality, is what it would do. Another possibility is Platonic realism, and I don't want to get too far into this because I think I'm pushing the time. In Platonic realism and morality there's these moral truths that sort of like exist in the ether, right? As where they exist. The problem is that would be an abstract object, and abstract objects don't have causal power. And oughtness is a causal power. It's causing you, to behave or not to behave, in a certain way. And even if objective moral truths existed independently of God, they would have no power or force upon them to be a source of conduct, and hence why you'd have to have a person like a deity, a personal deity, to give that sense of obligation. So I think here to summarize the argument, I appeal to the intuition of right and wrong, sort of like what I did with the film. What's it called? I keep saying Batman Begins. What's it called?
Dark Knight.
All right, sorry, I apologize. That was a moral breach of trust, amongst the movie fans. All right, but I appeal to the intuition of right and wrong. Ask what's the source or grounding for this sense of obligation. I show that society and individuals are inadequate sources, particularly for objective morality, and the only source for objective morality would be God, because he is the only person that would give us a sense of an obligation to an objective morality. Yes, sir.
Okay, if you're going to remotely say there is a God, why would all of this be necessary if you were in the mode of respecting him, awing, and all those other things? Does this whole argument just cloud the picture of, I don't want to do what he says?
I don't think that's what I argued, that I don't want to do what he says.
I think that's what the whole subject is hiding, is I don't want to do what he says, so anything's possible.
Well, if you start with the premise that there is a God, then objective morality automatically flows from that. But if you're dealing with somebody who does not accept God as the premise, then you have to say, okay, well, do you at least acknowledge objective morality? And then if you do that, you can reason backwards from that to God.
Like you started with that boat thing, there is no backwards from there.
Yeah.
Because it's just a no-win scenario that they tried to figure a win out. And respecting I mean, if you're trying to choose a God, then you would choose one that aligns with what we're saying morality is. If you're trying to choose one that you believe in, then you would take all of these things that you see and say, which God goes there?
This argument is not arguing for the Christian God in particular. And I think this argument works in the Islamic conception of God, in the Jewish conception of God, and even in certain forms of deistic conceptions of God as well. All of those would apply. But I think it shows that there is a fundamental flaw in the naturalistic worldview and philosophy, because, well, look, once we start complaining about something, we're appealing to a standard, and then you got to start figuring out, well, where did this standard come from, right? And then you're off to the argument. And so I think it shows naturalism to be false. It also shows, I think, pantheism to be false as well, because in the pantheistic religion, all is God, and there is no distinction between good and evil, but good and evil is a distinction, and I find that problematic in the pantheistic worldviews. Yeah.
Would you say that this would argue, or does it argue more for a Unitarian God as opposed to a polytheistic system? Or would you even say
it would be more of a monotheistic system, like the Jewish and Islamic Christian theistic versions. With the polytheistic systems, I just find that those sense of deities incoherent itself, because I wouldn't even call them deities. I would call them greater beings, but they're not deities, because once you start assigning divinity to a being, there would be nothing greater than that being, but they have all this gradation of value and perfections and lack thereof. And I mean, once you start talking about lack thereof, I'm like, that's not even a deity anymore. You're just talking different ontological levels, but you're not talking deity anymore. I found that to be incoherent. And then once you understand that polytheism seems to be an incoherent system, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe there's multiple gods that are all perfect, right? And have the great, is a great making being. Well, once you start doing that, you have to ask, well, how do you distinguish between these deities that all have perfections itself? And the only way to do that is to say one would have an attribute that another wouldn't, but once you do that, once it lacks, it's not deity anymore. It's not the greatest being anymore. And then if you said, another possible way is you could say, oh, they all have the great making attributes, then you'd have to localize them. But once they're localized, then they lack a necessary divine attribute as well, of omnipresence, because of locality. And it's, I think this would argue for the monotheistic concept of God, whether it's a Christian or not. I don't know. That's a different discussion altogether. And it's worth exploring, absolutely. And that's why you meet every Thursday.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop there. It's 8:15. Unless there's any other pressing questions, and there's people leaving already. All right. There you go. We're going to the polytheistic. Anybody got other pressing questions? All right, well, thanks so much. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks a lot, Steve. All righty. Well, looks like we're getting out a bit early again today. I think it's been decided that Cane's is the restaurant that we're going to be going to after, if anyone wants to stay for that. It's kind of unofficial, kind of after thing. Raising Cane's. It's on the corner of Campbell and Coit, right?
Everything's on Coit and Campbell.
Yeah. The address will be put in the Discord.
Yep.